The Alpha King arrived disguised as a servant to meet his future mate. Then he overheard. "Welcome, everyone. Imagine giving away your crown for a single chance to discover whether anyone could love the man beneath it. If you enjoy heartfelt stories of destiny, courage, and second chances, please subscribe and ring the notification bell. Your support helps this channel continue sharing unforgettable journeys like this one." Before the first rays of dawn touched the towers of Whitmore Manor, a lone supply wagon rolled quietly through the estate gates. Among the servants climbing down with sacks of flour and bundles of firewood was a tall stranger wearing plain charcoal clothing, worn leather boots, and the humble named Vincent Cole. No one bowed. No one recognized him. That was exactly how Victor Calloway, Alpha King of Silvercrest, wanted it. Hidden beneath the sleeve covering his wrist rested the royal mark carried by every ruling Alpha, while a silver ring engraved with the twin-headed wolf remained tucked safely inside his pocket. For the first time in many years, he felt invisible instead of powerful. It was strangely comforting. Victor had refused every carefully arranged introduction prepared by noble families across the kingdom. Too many smiles had been offered to the throne instead of the man who occupied it. The royal council believed destiny had already pointed toward a future Luna within the Whitmore bloodline, but Victor intended to discover the truth with his own eyes. If his destined mate possessed genuine kindness, she would show it to a servant long before she ever offered it to a king. Whitmore Manor shimmered with polished marble, flowering gardens, and elegant balconies overlooking the surrounding forest. Behind that beauty, however, every hallway pulsed with nervous urgency. Servants hurried from room to room carrying silver trays, fresh flowers, and embroidered tablecloths, while Lady Marjorie Whitmore inspected every detail with relentless precision. Her daughter, Lenora Whitmore, moved through the grand entrance like someone already imagining herself wearing a queen's crown. Whenever distinguished guests approached, her smile appeared effortlessly. The instant they walked away, warmth disappeared from her expression as though it had never existed. Lord Dorian Ashford, Victor's oldest friend and trusted royal advisor, arrived openly as the king's official envoy. His presence immediately drew the attention of every noble inside the manor, leaving the newest servant almost completely unnoticed. Exactly as planned, Victor accepted a broom, gathered firewood, and quietly blended into the household. He listened far more than he spoke. Every conversation, every impatient order, and every careless glance revealed another layer of the people surrounding him. Then a sharp cry echoed from the kitchens. A young maid with soft red hair had accidentally splashed boiling water across her hand. Before anyone else moved, another young woman rushed to her side. She guided the frightened girl beneath cool running water, wrapped the burn with clean linen, and gently steadied her shaking shoulders. "You're safe, B," she whispered. "One mistake doesn't change who you are." Victor found himself unable to look away. The young woman wore a simple blue-gray dress instead of expensive silks. Her chestnut hair was loosely gathered behind her shoulders, faint freckles rested across her nose, and a worn crescent moon necklace lay quietly against her collarbone. No one thanked her. No one praised her. She simply returned to her work after making certain B could smile again. A few minutes later, Graham Prescott handed Victor a stack of folded linens and noticed the direction of his gaze. "That's Lydia Whitmore," he said quietly. "She's family, at least by blood. Around here, that doesn't seem to matter very much." Before Victor could ask another question, Lydia walked toward him carrying fresh towels. Her warm green eyes met his without hesitation or judgment. "You must be new," she said with a gentle smile. "The East Corridor can be confusing your first day. Come with me. It'll save you from getting lost before Lady Marjorie decides you've done something wrong." She believed she was helping an ordinary servant. Victor followed beside her through the long stone hallway, feeling something shift deep within him. He had entered Whitmore Manor searching for the woman destiny had promised. After only one morning, he could no longer ignore the quiet feeling that destiny had already found him first. Lydia led Vincent through the quieter corridors where polished grandeur slowly faded into narrow service passages that most guests would never notice. She pointed out hidden staircases, storage rooms, and the fastest route to the kitchens, speaking with calm patience instead of hurried commands. Victor listened far more closely than any servant should have, not because he feared becoming lost, but because every gentle word revealed another piece of the woman standing beside him. She never complained about the endless work waiting for her. She simply accepted each task with quiet dignity, as though protecting the peace of others mattered more than defending herself. That quiet strength unsettled him in ways he had not expected. Throughout the morning, the estate became increasingly restless. Carriages rolled through the front gates, carrying influential families eager to witness the coming royal visit. Fresh flowers arrived by the wagonload. Musicians rehearsed in the ballroom, while cooks struggled to prepare an extravagant feast. Every conversation eventually returned to the same subject. Lady Marjorie confidently declared that Lenora possessed every quality a future Luna should display. Servants repeated those words without conviction, careful not to question their mistress where anyone might hear. Lydia remained absent from every important discussion. Instead, she polished silver, arranged guest rooms, and helped elderly workers carry loads far heavier than they should have lifted alone. Victor noticed something else as the hours passed. Whenever Lydia entered a room, several servants seemed to breathe a little easier. Bea smiled again after her earlier accident. Graham accepted her quiet advice when supplies ran short. Even the anxious kitchen staff relaxed whenever she appeared beside them. Respect followed her naturally, though she held no title and received no praise. By contrast, Lenora inspired admiration only while others were watching. During the afternoon, Victor carried linens into the grand drawing room, just as Lady Marjorie inspected every detail before another meeting with Lord Dorian. Lenora welcomed the royal envoy with graceful confidence, asking thoughtful questions about palace customs and speaking warmly about duty, honor, and sacrifice. The performance would have convinced almost anyone. Yet the moment Dorian stepped away to greet another guest, Lenora dismissed two exhausted maids with an impatient wave, criticizing them for wrinkles that scarcely existed. Victor lowered his eyes, pretending not to hear, though every sharp remark settled heavily in his thoughts. The difference between appearance and character was becoming impossible to ignore. Later, while delivering fresh towels to the garden fountain, Victor found Lydia kneeling beside an injured songbird tangled in flowering vines. She carefully freed the tiny creature without disturbing its damaged wing, cradling it until its frightened breathing slowed. Sometimes, she murmured softly, almost to herself, "Fear hurts more than the wound." She released the bird into a sheltered hedge where it could recover safely. She never realized another pair of eyes had witnessed the moment. Victor had faced rival alphas without hesitation, yet watching such uncomplicated compassion left him strangely defenseless. As evening shadows stretched across the estate, Graham quietly joined Victor outside the servants' quarters. After checking that no one lingered nearby, he spoke in a lowered voice. "You seem decent, Vincent. So let me offer one piece of advice. Stay away from family matters. Around here, seeing too much can become dangerous." Before Victor could ask what he meant, the distant sound of Lady Marjorie's voice echoed through an open window, calling Lydia away with unmistakable impatience. Lydia offered Graham an apologetic smile before hurrying toward the main house, her worn crescent moon necklace catching the last golden light of the day. Victor watched her disappear through the doorway, unable to shake the growing certainty that someone was working very hard to keep her exactly where she was, and even more determined to make sure no one ever questioned why. The following morning arrived beneath a sky washed in pale silver, but the atmosphere inside the Whitmore estate felt heavier than the gathering clouds. Every servant moved faster than usual, preparing for another day of royal inspections while trying to avoid Lady Marjorie's sharp gaze. Victor continued his role as Vincent, blending quietly into the endless rhythm of carrying linens, polishing banisters, and delivering supplies. Yet his attention never strayed far from Lydia. The more he observed, the more impossible it became to reconcile the family's treatment of her with the quiet respect she inspired among those who truly knew her. Shortly before noon, an anxious cry echoed from the banquet hall. Bea stood frozen beside a shattered crystal serving tray, dozens of sparkling fragments scattered across the polished marble floor. Her face had gone completely pale. The tray had been borrowed from the royal collection for the evening reception, and everyone understood its value. Before the frightened girl could even speak, Lenora swept into the room with perfectly measured outrage. "How careless! she said, loud enough for every servant to hear. Do you understand what you've done? He tried to explain that the tray had slipped when one of the tablecloths caught beneath her shoe, but her trembling voice dissolved beneath Lenora's accusations. Tobias Mercer, captain of the estate guards, stepped closer with folded arms, already prepared to remove the young maid from duty. Several servants lowered their eyes, afraid that defending B might draw punishment upon themselves as well. Then Lydia calmly walked forward. Without raising her voice, she knelt beside the broken crystal and began gathering the larger pieces before anyone could step on them. It wasn't intentional, she said. If someone must answer for the loss, let it be me. I assigned B to help with preparations. B stared at her in disbelief. Miss Lydia, no? It was my mistake. Lydia answered only with a small shake of her head, silently asking her to remain quiet. Victor felt every instinct urging him to intervene, but years of leadership had also taught him the value of patience. Revealing himself now would destroy everything he had come to learn. Even so, watching Lydia willingly carry another person's burden stirred an unfamiliar ache beneath the calm discipline he had always trusted. Lady Marjorie arrived moments later after hearing the commotion. Her expression never softened as she examined the shattered crystal. Another disappointment, she declared coldly, fixing her attention on Lydia instead of B. You have always been far too willing to excuse failure. She ordered Lydia to forfeit her remaining allowance for the season to repay part of the damage and assigned her additional duties throughout the coming week. Lydia accepted every consequence without protest. She neither defended herself nor revealed that she had done nothing wrong. Once the room had emptied, Victor quietly remained behind, helping collect the final glittering fragments from beneath the long dining table. You shouldn't have accepted blame that wasn't yours, he said carefully. Lydia offered him a gentle, tired smile. Sometimes protecting someone's future matters more than protecting your pride. He still believes she has won. Her answer lingered in Victor's thoughts long after she returned to work. No calculation hid behind her kindness. She simply chose compassion even when it cost her personally. That afternoon, Lord Dorian found Victor alone in the stable yard under the pretense of inspecting the estate horses. Without looking directly at him, Dorian spoke quietly enough that no passing servant could overhear. Everything you've witnessed points in one direction, he murmured. Are you beginning to question whether the woman this family presents is truly the one fate intended? Victor watched Lydia in the distance as she carried baskets of fresh laundry beside elderly servants who could barely keep pace. For the first time since arriving at Whitmore Manor, he admitted the answer to himself without speaking it aloud. Something about this household had been carefully arranged, and someone was working tirelessly to ensure Lydia remained invisible. As dusk settled over the estate, Victor noticed a narrow corridor leading toward the older wing of the manor where lights burned behind a locked study door long after the rest of the household had retired. Quiet voices drifted through the silence, and an uneasy feeling urged him to slow his steps, unaware that what waited beyond that door would soon change everything. The manor settled into an uneasy silence after midnight, but Victor had learned that the darkest truths rarely slept. Most of the servants had already retired, the fireplaces had burned low, and only scattered lanterns cast pools of golden light across the deserted corridors. Carrying a basket of folded linens over one arm, Vincent Cole appeared to be nothing more than another exhausted servant finishing the day's work. In reality, Victor's senses remained sharper than ever. Something inside him refused to believe the strange uneasiness surrounding Lydia was merely family cruelty. Too many moments failed to fit together. Too many questions remained unanswered. As he passed the abandoned West Wing, a faint sliver of light escaped beneath the door of the old study, a room Graham had quietly mentioned was rarely used. Victor slowed his steps. Voices drifted through the thick oak door, low enough to avoid notice, yet clear enough for an alpha's hearing. He took one silent step closer. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the opposite hallway. A housemaid carrying candles rounded the corner. Victor reacted instantly, lowering himself beside a cabinet and pretending to polish a brass railing while she walked past without a second glance. Only after her footsteps disappeared did he return to the door. His heartbeat remained steady, but the smallest mistake would expose everything. Inside, Lady Marjorie's voice broke the silence. Tomorrow changes everything. Once the royal ceremony begins, no one can question what has already been accepted. Lenora answered with quiet confidence. They won't. By then, everyone will believe I was always the intended Luna. Victor's expression hardened. Lady Marjorie continued. The original royal letter never mattered after I rewrote it. The court expected to find the girl connected to the Crescent heirloom. Instead, they received my version naming you. A brief rustling of paper followed. The authentic letter stays hidden until it's no longer dangerous. Victor's grip tightened around the folded linens. The altered invitation Dorian had suspected truly existed. Yet the conversation had only begun. Lenora gave a dismissive laugh. Lydia has spent her entire life believing she's lucky to eat at our table. She never realized the prophecy described her, not me. She still wears that old necklace without understanding why Mother worked so hard to erase everything else Aunt Evelyn left behind. Victor's thoughts immediately returned to the worn silver crescent resting against Lydia's neck. It had never been an ordinary keepsake. It was the missing piece tying every unexplained moment together. Lady Marjorie spoke again, colder than before. She's harmless because she trusts people too easily. Once I'm certain the king accepts you, Lydia will be sent away quietly. No inheritance, no home, no future. Lenora hesitated before asking. And B? The girl has seen Lydia keeping those old family belongings. Then B becomes the thief, Lady Marjorie replied without emotion. Fear is far more convincing than innocence. If necessary, they'll both disappear from this estate before anyone asks inconvenient questions. Victor felt a surge of anger unlike anything he had experienced since becoming king, but he remained perfectly still. Bursting into the room now would save no one. Without proof, the letter would vanish, the conspirators would deny every word, and Lydia would remain trapped inside the lie they had built around her life. At that very moment, the study door creaked as if someone inside had shifted a chair toward the entrance. Victor stepped backward just before the handle began to turn. Thinking instantly, he lifted the basket and hurried toward the corridor, passing another servant who had just entered from the kitchens. The door opened behind him. Lady Marjorie's eyes swept the hallway, finding only two weary servants finishing late-night duties. Satisfied, she quietly closed the door again. Victor did not slow his pace until he reached the shadowed courtyard where Lord Dorian waited beneath the ancient oak tree. For several moments, neither man spoke. Finally, Victor looked back toward the glowing windows of Whitmore Manor, his voice calm, but carrying a certainty that had not existed before. I didn't come here simply to find my future mate, he said. Tonight, I discovered someone has been stealing her future for years. From this moment on, I am no longer observing the truth. I am going to expose it. Sleep became impossible after Victor's conversation with Dorian. Dawn had not yet broken when the two men quietly divided their responsibilities. Dorian would remain in plain sight as the king's trusted envoy, watching every move made by the Whitmore family, while Victor continued wearing the identity of Vincent Cole. They both understood the danger. If Lady Marjorie suspected the truth too soon, every document, every witness, and every chance to expose the deception would vanish before the royal court ever arrived. For the first time since entering the estate, Victor was no longer observing fate. He was protecting it. The following morning unfolded beneath forced smiles and polished manners as preparations for the formal reception reached their final stage. Lady Marjorie assigned Lydia to oversee the servants instead of joining the family at breakfast, ensuring she remained invisible whenever distinguished guests passed through the manor. Lydia accepted the order without complaint, but Victor noticed the brief hesitation in her eyes when laughter echoed from the dining room. She was forbidden to enter. She did not envy the celebration itself. She simply understood, once again, where she had been told she belonged. While arranging fresh linens inside the west corridor, Victor quietly slipped away toward the older wing of the house. Guided by the previous night's conversation, he searched patiently until he discovered a hidden compartment behind an aging cabinet in the abandoned study. Inside rested a weathered cedar box secured by a delicate brass lock. Rather than forcing it open, he examined it carefully before concealing it beneath folded blankets inside a nearby storage chest. If the box disappeared immediately, suspicion would spread. If it remained where Lady Marjorie expected it, she might destroy everything. Victor chose a third path. He carefully removed the original royal letter and the older family records, replacing them with harmless estate papers Dorian had prepared in advance before returning the cedar box to its hiding place exactly as he had found it. Moments later, he met Dorian in the deserted chapel behind the manor, where no member of the Whitmore household would think to search. Without a word, Victor placed the genuine documents into the envoy's hands. Dorian sealed them inside a royal leather satchel bearing the Silvercrest crest and quietly dispatched a trusted royal guard to carry them beyond the estate before sunrise. From that moment forward, the evidence rested under royal protection, safe from fire, theft, or desperate hands. Even if Lady Marjorie searched every room in Whitmore Manor, the truth was already beyond her reach. Hours later, Lenora approached Victor while he carried wine into the reception hall. Her pleasant expression returned the instant she believed no one else could hear. "Vincent," she said softly, "you seem dependable. I appreciate loyal people." She placed a small velvet pouch into his hand. Its weight revealed silver coins. "Soon I may require a trustworthy witness. Lydia has become increasingly careless. If questions arise, I trust you'll remember what benefits your future." Victor lowered his head, pretending uncertainty instead of outrage. "Whatever my lady believes is best," he answered carefully. Satisfied, Lenora smiled and walked away, convinced another servant had quietly accepted her influence. Victor closed his fingers around the pouch only long enough to preserve it as evidence. Across the courtyard, Lydia watched the exchange from a distance without hearing a single word. A shadow crossed her face before she looked away. Believing Vincent had simply accepted generosity from the household, she had long ago stopped trying to understand. That mistaken impression settled heavily between them, though neither spoke of it. Later that afternoon, Bea tearfully confessed to Lydia that someone had questioned her about the old crescent necklace she always wore. Lydia instinctively reached for the silver pendant resting against her own heart. "It's only something my mother left me," she whispered. Nothing more. Yet even as she said the words, uncertainty flickered across her expression. Too many strange glances had followed that necklace over the years for it to be meaningless. As evening approached, Dorian quietly informed Victor that official members of the Royal Guard would arrive with the ceremonial heirloom the next day before the public presentation. The news froze Victor where he stood. If Lady Marjorie intended to eliminate every obstacle before the court assembled, the ceremony offered the perfect opportunity. Watching Lydia disappear into the fading light with quiet grace, unaware that invisible forces were already tightening around her, Victor made a silent promise that could no longer be undone. Whatever trap awaited, he would let it unfold only far enough to expose every guilty hand. Even if remaining hidden meant allowing the woman destined to become his mate to believe, for a little longer, that he had chosen to stand with the people determined to destroy her. Morning sunlight poured through the stained glass windows as noble guests filled the Whitmore estate, their conversations blending with the music prepared for the royal presentation. Everywhere Victor looked, appearances had become the highest priority. Servants rushed through corridors carrying polished silver and embroidered banners, while Lady Marjorie inspected every detail with relentless precision. Hidden beneath the quiet routine, however, another plan was already unfolding. The ceremonial heirloom of the crown, a magnificent silver wolf signet displayed only during the selection of a future Luna, arrived under heavy guard shortly before noon. Lord Dorian personally received the sealed case before placing it inside the family receiving room, where only a handful of trusted people were permitted to enter. Victor watched every face that lingered too long near the chamber. He no longer doubted that someone intended to use the ceremony itself as the final step in their deception. Lydia spent the morning directing younger servants, ensuring every guest was treated with kindness despite the growing tension surrounding the estate. Although she had slept little, she never allowed exhaustion to harden her spirit. When Bea stumbled while carrying fresh flowers, Lydia quietly steadied the arrangement before anyone noticed. Graham caught Victor's eye from across the hallway and gave the smallest warning glance. Something was wrong. Only minutes later, Tobias and several guards emerged from the receiving room with grim expressions. Lady Marjorie demanded silence as Tobias announced that the royal signet had disappeared from its display case. The hall erupted into confusion. Every servant was ordered to remain where they stood while guards began searching rooms throughout the manor. Victor forced himself to remain perfectly still. The trap had begun exactly as he feared. Tobias eventually returned carrying a velvet pouch recovered from Lydia's modest bedroom. Before anyone could question the discovery, he opened it and revealed the missing silver signet resting inside. Gasps spread across the room. B immediately cried out that Lydia would never steal anything, but Tobias silenced her with a stern command. Lenora covered her mouth with convincing shock, tears gathering in her eyes as she whispered that she could not understand how such a terrible mistake had happened. Lady Marjorie lowered her head as though grieving for the family honor. Only Victor recognized the careful performance hidden beneath their sorrow. Lydia stared at the signet without moving. She neither reached for it nor denied seeing it for the first time. Instead, she looked toward B and Graham, both trembling as guards questioned every servant who had spoken with her during recent days. Realizing innocent people would soon suffer beside her, Lydia slowly stepped forward. "Please," she said with remarkable calm. "They had nothing to do with this. If someone must answer, let it be me." Victor felt his chest tighten. Even now, facing disgrace and possible execution for stealing a royal heirloom, her first instinct was to shield others. The invisible bond he had struggled to ignore surged with unmistakable force. It was no longer a distant certainty waiting for confirmation. Every part of him recognized the woman standing before the guards as the mate destiny had chosen. Yet revealing himself at that instant would leave Lady Marjorie free to deny everything and destroy the remaining evidence before the court could hear it. Dorian met Victor's eyes across the crowded chamber, silently reminding him that justice required patience for only a little longer. Tobias ordered Lydia's hands bound before escorting her toward the entrance hall. As she passed Victor, she paused for the briefest moment. Her gaze settled on the small velvet pouch of silver coins Lenora had once placed in his hand, now hanging from his servant's belt because he had deliberately kept it untouched as evidence. Misunderstanding what she saw, sorrow quietly replaced the trust she had shown him since his arrival. She offered no accusation, only a faint, heartbreaking nod, as though accepting that another person she believed honorable had chosen the safer side. Victor remained frozen while she was led away, knowing that every instinct urged him to stop the guards immediately. Instead, he made the most painful decision of his life. He allowed Lydia to disappear beyond the great doors, trusting that the truth he had gathered would soon expose every lie, but also knowing that the next time he stepped forward, he could no longer do so as the servant called Vincent Cole. The great hall stood frozen beneath a suffocating silence as Tobias forced Lydia to her knees before the gathered nobles. Her wrists were bound, yet she lifted her chin with quiet dignity that no rope could steal. She struggled against the guards holding her back, tears streaming down her face as she begged them to believe Lydia had done nothing wrong. Graham remained motionless, knowing that one reckless word would only place another innocent life in danger. Around them, whispers spread through the crowd. Some pitied Lydia. Others had already decided her guilt without waiting for proof. At the front of the chamber, Lady Marjorie lowered her eyes in carefully rehearsed sorrow, while Lenora stepped forward with perfect composure. "No family should stand above justice," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "As painful as this is, the royal household deserves the truth." Tobias drew his sword. The sharp sound of steel echoed through the hall like the closing of a prison door. "Lydia Whitmore," he declared, "confess your crime before judgment is passed." Lydia slowly looked toward B instead of the guards. Her voice remained gentle despite everything that had been taken from her. "Don't carry this guilt," she whispered. "Live a life that is kinder than the one we've known." Victor felt something inside him break. He had remained silent to protect the truth. He had endured watching Lydia mistrust him because exposing the conspiracy too early would have destroyed every chance to save her. But one more heartbeat was already too much. Enough. The single word rolled through the chamber with calm authority. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward the servant standing quietly among the household staff. Vincent Cole walked forward without haste until he stood between Lydia and Tobias's raised sword. Laughter broke the silence. "Has the servant lost his mind?" someone mocked. Another noble shook his head with amusement. Tobias took one step closer. "Move aside," he warned, "or you'll kneel beside her." Victor did not answer. Instead, he slowly removed the worn leather strap from around his wrist. Beneath it gleamed the ancient royal mark carried only by the reigning Alpha King. Then, before anyone could understand what they were seeing, he reached into his pocket and placed the silver ring bearing the twin-headed wolf upon his finger. The laughter died instantly. Lord Dorian walked into the center of the hall. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty," he said clearly enough for every soul to hear. "Alpha King Victor Calloway." For one endless moment, no one breathed. Then another royal guard fell to one knee. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, every soldier bearing the silver crest knelt before the man they had believed was an ordinary servant. The sound of armored knees striking marble echoed across the chamber like thunder. Shock swept through the guests. Nobles who had ignored Vincent lowered their heads in disbelief. Servants stared with wide eyes. Tobias stumbled backward, so suddenly his sword slipped from his hand and clattered across the floor. Lady Marjorie's face turned ashen. Lenora's confident smile disappeared completely as she realized the man she had tried to bribe had been the Alpha King from the very beginning. Only Lydia remained perfectly still. She looked at Victor as memories rushed through her mind. The stranger carrying firewood, the man who listened instead of judging, the servant who accepted every difficult task without complaint. The king standing before her and the humble newcomer she had guided through the corridors were one and the same. Victor crossed the final steps, separating them. Without speaking, he untied the ropes around Lydia's wrists with his own hands. The angry red marks left by the bindings caught his eye, and for the first time since entering Whitmore Manor, genuine sorrow appeared across his face. "Forgive me," he said quietly enough that only she could hear. "I asked you to trust a servant, when all along you deserved the protection of your king." Lydia searched his eyes, seeing neither a ruler nor a disguise, but the same compassionate man she had welcomed on his first morning at the estate. Victor then turned to face the hall, his voice carrying effortlessly through the stunned silence. "I did not come here to choose a Luna based on polished appearances. I came disguised as a servant because I wished to see the truth before anyone recognized my crown." His gaze settled on Lady Marjorie and Lenora. "And while you believed I was beneath your notice, I heard everything." At that very moment, the massive entrance doors swung open. Rows of royal guards flooded into the hall beneath the silver banners of Silvercrest, surrounding the estate with disciplined precision. Lady Marjorie closed her eyes. Lenora's final hope vanished. The lies that had ruled Whitmore Manor for years had survived wealth, influence, and fear, but they could not survive the truth the Alpha King himself had witnessed. No one moved after the royal guards surrounded the great hall. The silence felt heavier than any accusation that had filled the room only moments before. Lydia looked down at the red marks left by the ropes around her wrists, gently rubbing them as though trying to convince herself she was truly free. Before she could speak, Victor stepped toward her, not as a ruler claiming authority, but as the quiet servant she had come to trust. He removed the velvet pouch of silver from his belt and placed it on the nearest table. "Lady Lenora offered this to buy my silence," he said calmly. "I kept it untouched because the truth deserves proof, not promises." Several nobles leaned forward as Dorian accepted the pouch and called 2 royal clerks to examine its contents. Lenora tried to protest, but her voice faltered when Graham stepped out from the crowd. Though his hands trembled, he bowed respectfully before Victor. "Your Majesty, I saw Lady Lenora speaking privately with Vincent that afternoon. I feared she was trying to manipulate another servant, but I had no evidence." Victor nodded without interrupting. Then Dorian opened a leather satchel brought by one of the royal guards. Inside rested the original letter bearing the royal seal, together with several aging family records recovered from the hidden compartment. One by one, the documents were placed before the witnesses. Lady Marjorie's shoulders slowly sagged as the unmistakable handwriting confirmed that the invitation had never named Lenora. It described the heir recognized by the crescent moon keepsake passed from mother to daughter. Every eye turned toward the necklace resting quietly against Lydia's dress. Without being asked, Lydia unclasped the worn chain and laid it beside the letter. Dorian carefully unfolded another faded page discovered inside the cedar box. It contained an inventory written years earlier by Lydia's late mother, listing the crescent necklace and a pearl hairpin intended for her daughter. Victor glanced toward Lenora. The hairpin. For a brief moment, she remained motionless. Then, realizing denial had become impossible, she slowly removed the elegant pearl ornament from her hair. It sparkled beneath the chandeliers before slipping from her shaking fingers onto the polished floor. The soft sound echoed through the chamber. He quietly stepped forward, picked it up, and carried it to Lydia without saying a word. Lydia accepted it with tear-filled eyes, holding both keepsakes against her heart. No triumphant speech followed. The silence itself revealed everything that had been stolen from her. Tobias lowered his head before Victor. "Your Majesty, I carried out orders without questioning them." Victor answered firmly, but without cruelty. "A captain is entrusted to protect the innocent, not merely obey the powerful." Tobias removed the insignia from his uniform and surrendered his sword, accepting the judgment without resistance. Lady Marjorie closed her eyes as royal guards escorted her forward. Years of calculated confidence had disappeared, replaced by the weight of choices she could no longer hide behind influence or reputation. Lenora looked toward Lydia, searching desperately for anger, but found only sadness. "Why didn't you fight me?" she whispered. Lydia's reply came almost as gently as every kindness Victor had witnessed since entering the estate. "Because becoming like you would have been a greater loss than anything you took from me." Those quiet words left Lenora unable to answer. As the hall slowly emptied, Victor approached Lydia once more. "There is something else that belongs to you," he said. He placed a folded deed into her hands. It restored ownership of the small cottage that had once belonged to her mother, a home she believed had been lost forever. Lydia stared at the document in disbelief before looking back at him. This time there was no distance between the king and the servant she remembered. Only gratitude mixed with questions neither of them had yet spoken aloud. Outside, the evening sky glowed with the first silver light of the rising moon. The estate that had imprisoned Lydia's future no longer held any power over her. Yet Victor knew one final choice remained untouched by law, evidence, or destiny itself. Justice had been restored, but he had not come merely to correct the past. Before the moon completed its climb across the night, he would ask Lydia for something that could never be commanded, inherited, or won by a crown alone. The moon hung high above the valley as Lydia walked through the garden behind her mother's restored cottage, where white roses swayed gently beneath the summer breeze. For the first time in years, no one was waiting to order her back inside. No one expected her to lower her eyes or apologize for simply existing. The little home that had once been taken from her belonged to her again, and the quiet peace surrounding it felt more precious than any grand estate. She paused beside the old stone bench where her mother had once read stories beneath the evening sky. With careful hands, she fastened the pearl hairpin into her chestnut hair before touching the crescent moon necklace resting over her heart. They no longer felt like forgotten keepsakes. They felt like pieces of herself that had finally found their way home. Soft footsteps approached along the garden path. Victor stopped a respectful distance away, dressed neither as the humble servant called Vincent nor as the Alpha King in ceremonial robes. He wore a simple dark coat, the kind of clothing that belonged only to the man Lydia had first come to know. For a quiet moment, neither of them spoke. They simply smiled, remembering a frightened servant carrying firewood and a young woman kind enough to help a stranger without asking who he was. Victor finally broke the silence. "When I came here, I believed I was searching for my future mate." He let out a gentle breath. "Instead, I found the woman who reminded me what kind of king I wanted to become." Lydia's eyes glistened, and I thought I was helping a servant who looked lost. A warm laugh escaped them both, dissolving the last trace of distance that had once stood between them. Victor reached into his pocket and drew out the silver ring engraved with the twin-headed wolf. He did not hold it like a king presenting a royal command. He held it the way a man offers his heart, knowing it may be accepted or refused. "The council is waiting for me to name a Luna," he said quietly, "but they can wait a little longer." He looked into her eyes with complete honesty. "Destiny may have chosen us long ago. I won't ask Destiny to answer for you." Lydia Whitmore, if there were no throne, no prophecy, and no crown, would you still choose me? Tears slipped gently down Lydia's cheeks, but her smile never faded. She stepped forward until only a heartbeat separated them. I already did, she whispered. I chose you the morning a quiet servant thanked me for showing him the way through a hallway. Victor lowered his forehead to hers, closing his eyes as emotion overcame every royal lesson that had ever taught him to hide it. Lydia placed her hand over his, closing his fingers around the silver ring before guiding his hand back to his own heart. A king may wear the crown, she said softly, but I fell in love with the man who never expected anyone to bow. As their hands remained joined, the twin-headed wolf ring shimmered beneath the moonlight, while the crescent necklace answered with the same gentle silver glow. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The ancient bond had already recognized what two ordinary hearts had discovered long before titles, ceremonies, or destiny could name it. In the weeks that followed, Silvercrest welcomed its new Luna with celebration, but Lydia changed remarkably little. She still visited the palace kitchens to thank the staff by name. She insisted that every servant be treated with the dignity she had once been denied. Bea accepted the responsibility of leading the royal household. Graham found security for his family, and Tobias devoted himself to earning back the honor he had once surrendered to fear. Justice had restored what deception had stolen, but kindness transformed what justice alone never could. On the day Victor and Lydia stood together before their people, the kingdom saw a king beside his Luna. Those who knew the whole story saw something far greater. They saw a servant who had been loved before anyone knew he wore a crown, and a woman whose quiet goodness had changed the heart of the most powerful alpha in the realm. Some people spend their lives searching for a throne. Victor found something far rarer, a love that recognized the man before the king. And perhaps that is why destiny chose them in the first place.